Well, good morning. And so what I'm going to do this week is I'm going to jump right into the reading. It's from Matthew chapter 13. It's known as the parable of the wheat and the tares. It says, "Another parable Jesus put forth to them, saying, The kingdom of heaven is like a man who sowed good seed in his field. But while men slept, his enemy came and sowed tares among the wheat and went his way. But when the grain had sprouted and produced a crop, then the tares also appeared. So the servants of the owner came to him and said, Sir, did you not sow good seed in your field? How then does it have tares? He said to them, An enemy has done this. The servants said to him, Do you want us to then go and gather them up? But he said, No, lest while you gather up the tares, you also uproot the wheat with them. Let both grow together until the harvest, and at the time of harvest I will say to the reapers, First gather the tares, then bind them into bundles to burn them, but gather the wheat into my barn." It's a very short story, and when I read it, what the main message I get out of that story is more wheat, less weeding. It's really simple. Really simple. More wheat, less weeding. And I think what you want to leave with as kind of maybe one of your takeaways with that is asking yourself, when you want to do weeding, is this the time for harvest? Because if you look in the gospel there of Matthew, it says the kingdom of heaven is like a blank on almost every single one of the parables. And here, in this case, it's the kingdom of heaven is like a good man who sowed seed in his field. Well, think about this. What does the good man want? He wants wheat, right? That's what this on the very little level. That's what this guy wants. He wants wheat. Stop weeding my field because you're going to destroy my wheat. Wait for the harvest. I mean, just on a really down-to-earth, practical sense. Let's say you live off your crops. You need the wheat to feed yourself, to feed your family, to maybe sell to make money. What's more important to you? No weeds and less wheat, or more wheat and some weeds growing into it? The choice is simple. I mean, you want to eat, so you want more wheat. And I think that part of the parable makes sense to us. We know about wanting more money, more time, more stuff, right? We get more. But I think what people have a hard time with is understanding the weeds. Because there is good weeding and there's destructive weeding. And I think it becomes clear that Jesus is talking about a destructive weeding once we start digging into the type of weed he's referring to. Because these weeds aren't the silly little weeds we find in our garden amongst our flowers. I think everybody here has had an experience of having some sort of garden or maintaining a garden. And you think about it. You grow some vegetables, you grow some flowers, stuff like that. We're used to that. But in every kind of these gardens, you can go in there and you can see the weed, pull it up, and no harm done to your flowers. It's not hard. But no matter what kind of garden it is, you've still got this battle between the weeds and the gardener. That's what's always going on. And it's a picture of our life as well. The key is, in the gardens we're used to, you can pull those weeds out without destroying the vegetation. And the idea is that those are clearly identifiable evils and falsities in our life. Things that we go, oh yeah, I really shouldn't be doing that. Pull it out. Off it goes. That's fine. But we're supposed to look out for this particular kind of weed because it's talking about a destructive weeding and a type of weed that destroys the good when you pull it out. Which is why the Lord's talking about this parable in Israel. All right, because it's a different kind of weed. Wheat is grown in fields. And it's grown in kind of a carpet-like fashion. There's no paths in it. There's no way to reach in. Pulling up the weeds with wheat endangers the wheat as well. And just to give you an idea of a picture here, This is how wheat grows. It's in this field. And you can just see how dense it is that, going in there to pull out a weed isn't the same as going out into our gardens out front here and plucking some weeds to make the roses look nicer. It's a different animal. So, think about it in this situation. You're the Lord. What do you want? Well, He wants more wheat as well. So what do? Well, the story of this parable is you wait for your harvest. Because, why? You want the wheat. If ripping out the weeds destroys the wheat, well, what have you accomplished? You've got less food to eat. You've got less money. You've got less stuff. So, the Lord, He also wants more wheat. He wants more good in the world, more people to going to heaven. And if He can get more people into heaven by having some weeds around, so be it. So be it. Sometimes we just get a little overzealous and over-anxious and eager to help, and we would like to go out and do some weeding. Yeah, okay. But in that process, we can destroy the good in others. You can criticize people and their intentions. Maybe we do it to ourselves. We beat ourselves up for our own inadequacies. And that's why we have to remind us of this parable. More wheat, less weeding. Some of those weeds have to be removed at harvest. You can see in this parable very clearly that the Lord is the good man. The field is the world, and that even in that first stage of afterlife where the good people and evil people are mixed together. That's kind of the picture here. The enemy is the hells, and this is the battle between good and evil. The Lord sows the seed, and the hells come along trying to destroy it. And then what? The servants of the Lord come along and say, "Hey, would you like us to do some weeding for you?" It seems like a nice gesture. If somebody comes by your house and offers to do some weeding, you're probably going to say, "Yes, please. Thank you very much." They're trying to undo the mess that was created. And what's the Lord's reply? No thanks. No thanks. Just be patient. Just be patient. We will separate this all out at the harvest. Don't harm the good. Be patient. Cooperate with the Lord. But our culture sometimes just likes to do some weeding. Some people do it with good intentions, sometimes not so much. But the Lord's asking for a cooperation in the process, to have that patience, to let that wheat and the weeds just grow together. Don't destroy the good stuff. More wheat, less weeding. Think about just some instances in life where this can happen, where you walk through the mall or shopping center, you see somebody who looks a little weird, and you think, oh, this guy's a jerk, this guy's a loser, this guy's dirty, this whatever. You can destroy all the good in that person really quickly. You haven't cooperated with the Lord's plan. You pulled a weed, right? Gossip, right? Same thing. You're murdering somebody spiritually. You're judging the actions, and by gossiping, you've destroyed the good in that person. You yanked another weed. Teenagers, they do this all the time, right? Can you believe this person's dating that person? Oh my gosh, they're so terrible. I can't believe this is happening. Not really helpful. And it's not just weeding other people. It's weeding in our own minds, right? This field is a field of us too. We're a great big mix of good and bad things. I can be nice to my wife one moment, not so nice another. I can give to my favorite charity and then lose my patience with my kid. We're all a mix of this good and bad in us. We each have our own field, and though we have to separate that good and evil in us. But what makes one of the things that makes this parable interesting to me is that when I was researching just what these weeds were, I came across some details that I thought gave this parable some more depth. First, as we saw in the picture, the weeds and the wheat look very similar when they're young, and it's only later in life that they can be distinguished. And so just like in the parable, the good man and the servants did not know right away that these were weeds, that these weeds were sown. And it's the same thing with people too. You don't always know early on in interaction with somebody whether that's a good or evil person, but you can tell by the fruit that it bears. Likewise, you can't tell by their losing my spot there. But The other thing about these weeds is that they don't bear fruit. So you have people who are evil, they bear bad fruit. These weeds don't bear good fruit. If you follow along the lines, though, of some modern type thinking, they say, any love is good love. And this parable doesn't say, just let it all go and it'll all be fine. And that's where we have this tension to say, okay, don't weed now, but there is that separation at harvest. And there's a reason for that. See, these weeds are thought to be a plant called darnel. And darnel is poisonous. And so, just like evil is poisonous in our life, these weeds are poisonous in our spiritual life. So this is why you bother to separate them at the harvest. Because you don't want to eat this. Remember, think back, you're just this practical Jewish farmer. You got to separate it because you don't want to eat it. It's poisonous. They say, where is it? It says, if you make bread that contains darnel, it will cause drunkenness. It has been known to be given medicinally in a harmful quantity, and it's recorded to produce all the symptoms of drunkenness: a general trembling, followed by an inability to walk, hindered speech, and vomiting. So you don't want to eat this stuff. And this is what causes the trouble in life, because you say, all right, well don't weed, cooperate. All right, I'll be nice. And yes, but at some point you do have to do the separation. But you just got to know when it's harvest time. That's the trick. That's the trick. Because if you look at these effects of drunkenness, it sounds like evil, right? Our theology talks a lot about the delights of evil. It can be fun to be drunk, pleasure in the moment, but there's pain that inevitably follows. It's the same thing with drunkenness. It could be a natural pain of a hangover, but it could also be something that you've done when you're drunk that you regret later. Something more serious. And evil's that same way. Delight in the moment, pain for you, family, and friends later on. Now, the alleged poisonous properties of this weed are generally believed to be due to a fungus that is part of it. So think about fungus, something that thrives in the dark, thrives in filth, something that you'd want to get rid of. And that's why at the end of the parable there is this judgment. There is the harvest. And the Lord waits and waits and waits. He waits until those crops are ready to be harvested. And that's where the separation takes place. So you don't engage in destructive weeding, right? Don't do that. Don't destroy the wheat. Don't destroy the things that are good in people. But then at that time of harvest, the Lord sends those harvesters out and says, okay, now do it, separate it up, and the evil gets burned. At the harvest, you can clearly tell the difference between what a good piece of wheat is and what a weed is. You can tell the difference. And now that you can see what it is, you can safely remove it and get rid of it. So, I think that's how we're supposed to view evil in our life, really. Not with all the judgment and anger and guilt that goes with it. It's just, oh, this is good, this is bad, I need to just go throw that in the bin. Just get rid of it. Just put it aside. It's obviously not what the hells want us to do. They want to, ping you with guilt and shame and all the other stuff that goes with it. They want you to think that God's angry with you and He's going to get you, He's going to zap you. But that's not what the new church is about. No. Just see that evil as something separate, something that should be thrown in the bin. Don't feel so bad about it, but move on. The harvest is an orderly process. You got to look at what has been harvested. Keep the good, keep the wheat, burn the evil. Just had one other reading for you today from True Christian Religion 653, and it's talking a bit about, this dynamic here of noticing the good and the evil in people. Swedenborg writes, as everyone knows, a lamb can only behave like a lamb. A sheep can only behave like a sheep. By the same token, a wolf can only behave like a wolf. And a tiger can only behave like a tiger. If all these animals are put in the same space, surely the wolf will devour the lamb, the tiger will devour the sheep. That is why there are shepherds to guard the flock. As everyone knows, a spring of sweet water is incapable of issuing bitter water from its source. A good tree is incapable of bearing the fruit of a bad kind of tree. A grapevine cannot poke us the way a thorn bush can. A lily cannot scrape us the way a bramble can. A hyacinth cannot pull at our clothes the way a thistle can. And neither can these bad plants do what these good plants do. Therefore we pull all those weeds out of the fields, vineyards, and gardens, gather them into piles, and throw them in the fire. A similar thing happens to evil people when they arrive in the spiritual world, according to the Lord's words. The Lord also said to the Jews, "You offspring of vipers, how can you say good things when you yourselves are evil?" Good people, from the good treasure of their heart, bring forth good things. Evil people, from the evil treasure of their heart, bring forth evil things. So you got to have that separation at some point. But in all of these instances, it's always a separation later when the evils are clearly identified. The bramble bush is pulling at you with its thorns. The bitter water is coming from its source. It's clearly identified. You're not jumping at it too early. In our life, just like a field, a harvesting does happen repeatedly. You don't just have a field that gets harvested once. So we do need to do some harvesting. When you spot something evil in your life, you got to ask yourself, well, is this time for a harvest? Can I remove this safely? Can I remove this safely without destroying something good in me or somebody else? It's much more difficult when you think you see the weed in somebody else's life, because can you pull it out in somebody else without destroying the good? Because we want to rid the world of evil, but the Lord wants more wheat. And that's really the priority here in this parable. More wheat. The only way it can be done in an orderly way is when it gets to a point where you can truly distinguish between the two. So cooperating with the Lord's plan takes some patience. And I think that's the big thing out of this, is that you've got to be patient. We have these essential teachings that the Lord gives us, says that there's only a few things you've got to do right in life to have entrance into heaven. You've got to believe in God. You've got to follow the Ten Commandments. No matter what religion or thing you subscribe to, if you believe in God, you follow the Ten Commandments, you do that right, the rest can be sorted out later. Eternity is a long time, and you can have a lot of education about the nature of true spiritual reality. And what the Lord's trying to do is with this parable, is to say, look, if you just cooperate and let them believe in me, do the Ten Commandments, the rest will be fine. If you go too early into your condemnation of evil, you might end up doing some harm in the process. The goal is to get people to heaven. Help them by waiting for harvest. Amen.